Hello everyone, more wishlist videos. We're gonna break down the characters now. This is really exciting. We're gonna start with the poster boy Ryu, or at least he was the poster boy. We're gonna talk about things that we think should be buffed with Ryu, maybe nerfed, probably not because it's Ryu. And Ryu is very interesting, Mir, because this time around, for the first season, he is considered by many players a low tier character, even though Ryu is supposed to be well-rounded, you know? And with Street Fighter 4, he was strong on the first season. Street Fighter 5, he was used a lot as well, but for Street Fighter 6, we're barely seeing Ryu at all, if any, in tournament play. And even we do, most Ryu players have like side characters like DJ or something, right? They're not using Ryu all the way. Let's discuss like why that is. Why is Ryu not so popular, and why do the other Shotos like Luke and Ken overshadow this character so damn bad?
It's the usual problem of finding a niche, in the sense that when you have a generalist character, if you find someone else that does most of everything you do better than you do, then what is the point of playing, your character, right? Like Ryu is in that situation right now.
Yeah,
like compared to Ken and Luke, he doesn't really do anything particularly exceptionally, better than them.
Yeah,
and
like
I guess
they
you
have
could argue it's the zoning, but not really, and we're gonna get into that.
Right, they have like superior corner carry, Oki, right? There's a lot of utility compared to Ryu. Ryu is supposed to be well-rounded, and I think a common misconception of that is like, well, how he can't be low tier if he's so well-rounded. But I think Ryu actually has some giant flaws. I think the biggest issue with Ryu is his Denjin stock system. I think compared to the other stocks in Street Fighter 6, in some ways, this makes Ryu weaker, and I don't know if Capcom anticipated this, and I'll explain why. So Ryu, when he gets his Denjin stock, it enhances his Hashogeki, his palm smash, and it gives him a lot of cool conversions and pressure because it's plus on block. But the issue is that Ryu has very few setups to get this Denjin stock in the first place, where you'll get a good enough knockdown. Most of the time, you'll land a high blade kick, like a donkey kick, and then you can get the stock up. But what happens is that now you're full screen. So what do you think is going to happen at this point, right? You want to keep the opponent out by zoning them, but as soon as you throw that fireball, your Denjin stock is gone. So the chances of you like being close, knocking down, and having the stock up to actually use it with the palm is like really rare, unless you intentionally just not throw fireballs, which makes Ryu weaker, and approach your opponent this way, right? And not use one of your main tools, because you, in some cases, you just don't want to throw a fireball, and other characters with a stock system just don't have to deal with that. Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, this is very similar, actually, as a comparison to how Juri used to be in Street Fighter 5, where she would have to give up offense to get their stocks back.
Yeah.
And Ryu is not a rushdown character either, because he is a more balanced archetype. So it's not as easy for him to, say, dash in and steal back his turn while I try to throw you, hit you, or use some move to skip neutral.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't really have them. And if he does, they're fairly, risky, right? Like his Tatsu. Yeah, you can use his Tatsu to go through a fireball and get a knockdown and get pressure. But if it gets blocked, you get blown up, especially in a game like Street Fighter 6 where you get punish countered. Ideally, if you have a character that has a stock system, you want to create situations where, like you were saying, you get the Oki, you get the stock, and you get to continue pressure, but Ryu has to choose which one of the two he wants, which naturally makes his pressure less effective.
And the Denjin fireball is really strong. Like, it's super fast. He recovers like really quick. It's so hard to jump in him when he has it. But a lot of times when Ryu players land this fireball, they're put in the same situation where, like, okay, I can stock up, choose to not use my fireball, walk forward, or just throw out another Denjin fireball. And Ryu has so many cool conversions when he has his Denjin stock up that you just don't normally get to see. Even his supers get empowered, but a lot of the times you don't even see this happen because he's so busy, throwing the stock away right away, right? Or going for one attempt with it. Now, this kind of goes hand in hand with Ryu's mid-screen. So a lot of players will mention that, well, Ryu's damage output, he's like the damage Shoto, his damage output is so high. And I think that's true, but it's only when Ryu has you in the corner or he dumps his entire bar. Like, Ryu lands a fat jumping combo on you, dumps all of his meter, and then goes for a Shoryuken to a level 3. That's when you really see the damage, right? Or of course, like in the corner like this.
But even then, and this is where what I wanted to mention. Even though Ryu does a lot of damage, and it is true that he does a lot of damage compared to a lot of other characters, he doesn't do that much more damage than Ken and Luke, which is what we were saying before. It's like you have a generalist character that is strong in certain areas, maybe, right? In the case of Ryu, would be his conversions and damage. But he isn't better than the other generalist characters that also do the same amount of damage, or at least comparable, you know, like either more or less. There's no real reason, again, to say, oh, well, I should pick Ryu because, you know, when I get the hit, it really matters. Yeah, but Ken, when he hits you, he puts you in the corner instantly, and then in the corner, he just kills you. Luke can just do so much damage anywhere. Sure, the charge knuckle combos are potentially a little bit complicated, but ideally, you know, you'd be able to land them and you get huge reward. So again, the comparison kind of like falls apart in the sense that it's very hard to justify.
Why'd you ask me to do this, Joe?
Exposed in front of the screen.
Yeah, there we go. And it's like the same deal, right? Except he's like pushing you to the corner while this is all happening. Like, so, and man, from a punish counter with the drive rush, like the raw drive rush, oh man, like this is insane, dude. Don't forget too, like when he's in the corner too, he gets converged like Ryu from that heavy donkey kick. Like he can do some wild stuff too with the jumping medium punch, you know, into the late level 3. Like that's really, really good. But anyways, let me follow up to this mid-screen argument with Ryu. So Ryu's mid-screen damage is actually quite low compared to a lot of characters, and his conversions aren't as good. So if Ryu like lands a medium, he can't go into heavy Tatsu a lot of times because even though it's his most damaging Tatsu, it side switches him, which is cool for the utility. But when you're trying to push the opponent to the corner, the side switch is not going to help you there, right? Then you have the choice between medium and light Tatsu. And a lot of times you still want to use drive rush because you're not quite in front of your opponent for the throw range, you know? You could use the light Tatsu, but then you're giving up a lot of damage to get close. And then, of course, there's using your heavy uppercut. So, a lot, like if you're going like a normal drive rush like this, like most of the time you do a combo like this, you know? And then you reset back to neutral. Which is fine because I think normally Capcom wants you to zone with Ryu, but I think the reason why they held Ryu back on his mid-screen conversions is because of the Denjin stock. His mid-screen conversion with the Denjin stock is actually quite cool. There's a lot of interesting combos you can do with juggles. Bam, bam. Like this. Into a safe jump. Like that's really, really sick. Of course, we know in the corner, there's a lot of amazing combos you can do in the corner from like day one that people found in the beta. A lot of flashy stuff because you have to give up the fireball. It's just a tough pill to swallow, you know?
Yeah, in general, a lot of Ryu's combos mid-screen, if you really want to score extra damage, rely on you landing the OD donkey kick. Which admittedly does net you, you know, some potentially pretty cool conversions, even mid-screen, with the opportunity of going into DP and then going into supers and stuff, right? Like you can do a good chunk of damage.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it is very drive intensive because of course you're spending 2 bars basically every time you want to get a conversion.
Yeah.
On top of more if you want to use drive rush to push them to the corner and stuff.
So the first solution I have that I hope they add for Ryu with his Denjin stock is somehow give Ryu players the option to still throw fireballs while maintaining the Denjin stock. So one idea I had is that since all 3 versions of the Denjin Fireball are the same, doesn't matter what strength you use after you get the stock, I think it'd be cool if they made it so that only his heavy Fireball expends the Denjin stock. And then you can throw light and medium Fireballs normally while maintaining the stock. This will allow you to still zone the opponent, and if they get close and approach you, you have that stock waiting to convert and combo from. The chat's mentioning to add a timer to it. Are you guys saying like he has Denjin power for a short period of time? I think that's too strong, guys. If Ryu was able to throw like 2-3 of these, it would be insane. He would have so much pressure if he did that. Or like double palm, like a block string, because this is safe on block, right? Plus, I think that'd be too much. Oh, you're kidding with the timer?
I personally think that you either need to make it faster so it's easier to get it in neutral. If they want you to be able to use it on offense so that you can continue pressuring, then you could have a system that is similar to G's level up system from Street Fighter V, where you can cancel specials into the Denjin charge.
The chat is mentioning is to add multiple stocks. And this is a good idea too. Is there any character in the game right now that has a stock system and a projectile? Because Ryu would be able to zone you out, and I guess you're spending a stock though if you're throwing a fireball still. I guess Jury, but her fireball is not nearly the same as Ryu's, you know? This goes like full screen. That would be pretty strong. And then, like you guys mentioned, then he would have the, maybe you'd have the ability to do an OD stock and get 2 charges. And if they carried between the rounds, if Ryu got like 3 stocks total, that would really make some cool combos. Like if he had multiple Denjin stocks in a combo, he would have some pretty powerful conversions. That might be a little too strong, but that is only if he's able to get away with having like 3 stocks on him. That would also make players like really want to get in close to him fast, because if Ryu players just like jump back and then just start getting non-stop stocks, that'd be pretty strong. Even the OD fireball, just having multiple of these like on standby, because I think you can like combo his level 1 from it too, because it recovers so fast. It's really really good.
In Street Fighter V, all of his fireballs were buffed at some point to have the same recovery, like light, medium, and heavy, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they always were like that, but they were buffed to be a total of 45 frames, which is pretty decent for a motion fireball, right? Like it's on the faster end of things. In Street Fighter 6, however, is normal fireballs. They have different startups, right? Like the light is slowest and the heavy is fastest.
Yeah.
But they have comparatively less and more recovery.
Yeah.
And there are a total of 47 frames. 47 frames is kind of slow, honestly, for a fireball on a character that is supposed to zone a lot, right? Like Ryu's fireball is pretty slow. His OD fireball is 40 frames, which is comparatively very fast. So his OD fireball is great. And then you look at his Denjin fireballs. And his Denjin fireball is 42 frames, and his OD Denjin fireball is 38 frames, which is faster than, I mean, it's the fastest fireball in the game. Guile's OD Sonic Boom is also 38 frames. So the point being, you have such a big power disparity between not having Denjin and having Denjin, right? Because the Denjin fireball you were mentioning is so good.
It's amazing.
It's really, really strong.
Yeah.
But then the non-Denjin fireball is kind of whatever. And I think another way of going about this is making his normal zoning a little bit more powerful, right? Like his fireball having slightly less recovery, or maybe just being a little bit safer on block, right?
So that's the other part about Ryu, the other big flaw of the character, and this is like a more of a meta issue, and that's because Ryu's drive rush, I feel, is very underwhelming. It makes it really hard for example, with Ken. Even though Ken's supposed to have a weaker fireball than Ryu, because Ken's fireball doesn't knock down the OD version, and because Ken's drive rush is so fast, when he's full screen, Ken is very dangerous, and he's able to close the gap easily because he can throw a slow fireball or OD and drive rush behind it. But Ryu doesn't have that luxury as well as Ken does, because his drive rush is just so slow, and that hurts, like I said, his follow-ups after he knocks down. And it's the same thing with like trying to get close with this Denjin stock because of his drive rush. So in a sense, the drive rush ties in a lot with what holds Ryu back from the other Shotos, and with his zoning too, because of the speed.
I'd rather inch on the side of caution and say that other characters should maybe get a slower drive rush.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying Ryu's drive rush should be faster. I'm just saying that like meta wise, that's why Ryu kind of lags behind Luke and Ken.
Yeah, no, like I was gonna say, as to suggest a change related around the about the drive rush. I'm not sure what you could do without having it be also more dangerous in neutral, right? Which is something that we had talked about before, that we do not really want more characters abuse, right?
Yeah, so unless Capcom wants to go all in, and they just embrace the meta.
I was gonna say one way would be, and this would tie in with what I was saying before, if you want the fireball to be a little bit safer on block, right? Like a little bit more plus on hit, maybe you can adjust the level of stun it inflicts when it hits the opponent.
Mm-hmm.
And so even though the drive rush is a little bit slower, you still would be able to pick up a combo from further away, or at least a block string, because you have that couple extra frames of the hit stun and block stun that you can use to your advantage. Another thing is on the fireballs that actually do knock down, right? Like his Denjin fireballs and OD fireball, you could change the knockdown to be a little bit more advantageous, so that especially if you use them maybe in the corner and stuff, you could set up a better situation for if you use Denjin, right? Because if you use a Denjin fireball in the corner, the frame advantage is just enough for you to get a charge off without being plus, because it's plus 52, I believe. So and the Denjin stock, as I was mentioning before, is 52 frames, so you should be completely even. But I mean, I think I'm okay with this being a little bit plus, right? I don't think you're sacrificing the follow-up to get the Denjin again.
Yeah, I just got it just there. Let's talk about his normals now, because I have beef with, I guess, two things specifically with Ryu's normals. My biggest beef is Ryu's standing medium punch. This thing is 6 frames startup, right? Has pushback, but it's -1 on block, and this drives me crazy that this is -1 on block. His crouching medium punch is fine since it has more range, but I feel like this button has no business being -1. I think Capcom should either make this a 5 frame startup -1 on block, or be +1 on block, because there are so many characters. Rashid's standing medium punch is +1. Chun-Li's standing medium punch is plus. Juri's is +2. I can go on, like Luke's crouching medium punch is +1. There's all these characters that have a lot of pushback on one of their mediums, and it happens to be plus. And I think this is a big deal, because Ryu kind of has this weird dead zone, so to speak, where his mediums are stubby, but they're fast. They're 6 frames. But his crouching medium kick is too slow, where it's 8 frames. And there's like this weird spot in the middle where his buttons will whiff, and they're not plus, right? Like, for example, in this, like in the range where Ryu's like dead zone is, Luke has his crouching medium punch, which is plus, and Ken has his crouching medium kick, which is 7 frames, 1 frame faster. So I feel like right here, if I was gonna buff any button, it would probably be Ryu standing medium punch.
You could have something like Guile, in the sense that I think it would be okay for Ryu's standing medium punch to be at least 0 on block, like his crouching medium punch is, considering that it has a bigger reward. But since they're trying to create this character that is more neutral focused rather than rushdown focused, I think it would be maybe best to change it around so that it is slower than his crouching medium punch, but have better range, so that you can still pick up a conversion from further away, especially on a counter hit, right? You could do a standing medium punch, counter hit into crouching medium kick from further away, and be able to contest with extra range.
His standing medium kick is really, really slow. I'm comparing it directly to Luke, and Ken gets a target combo conversion, and Luke can spam his standing medium kick. It's so quick. Ryu, I feel like if they want Ryu's to be the longer range and slower, like, he should have better conversions from it. You can get conversions from like a punish counter if you're close enough using this thing with standing light kick, but at the range you're using this, it's so risky, because since it's so slow, Ryu is very susceptible to jump-ins, because that's like the range he throws close heavy fireballs. So using the standing medium kick is kind of redundant, and it loses the DI, which also beats fireballs. I feel like it's a strange normal for Ryu.
Yeah, it's fairly interesting, because Ryu's standing medium kick is a total of 29 frames, which is exactly what Luke's is on whiff. However, Luke's is better on hidden block. Like, it's one of those normals that gets extra recovery when it whiffs, right?
Yeah.
So Luke's is 26 frames when it hits or is on block. So like in the case of a DI, for example, it's easier for him to block if he's done it at the right time. And another thing is that Luke's standing medium kick doesn't move him forward at all. He returns to the original position.
Yeah.
Once he's done it. Unlike Ryu's that moves forward a little bit, which makes it easier to whiff punish. right? That's the other thing that it does. So it's interesting how you have two characters that have the exact same standing medium kick, except one is obviously better than the other. Like Luke's is better than Ryu's.
Yeah, it's straight
and
up.
I do not understand
Power creep.
why. It's, like,
It's so weird, dude.
the frame advantage on the hit for the two standing medium kicks, I'm pretty sure is the same because they're both +4. Yeah, you have the argument that Ryu, if he gets a punish counter with standing medium kick, maybe he can land as level 1.
Yeah.
Which is not necessarily... Well, actually, no. I was gonna say it's not necessarily something that Luke can do, but no, Luke can do it as well because his level 1 is also.
Yeah, he's got the best level 1 in the game.
Yeah, so like, there's no argument there that Luke's is just better, and I'm not quite sure what the point of it is when Ryu is supposed to be maybe more neutral centric than Luke. At least he should have the same move, right?
Yeah.
But it's slightly worse in some barely noticeable way that still matter.
Also, fun fact, standing heavy kick with some crouchers.
And Luke's doesn't when he's close.
Luke's back heavy kick does not.
It's pretty funny in its own right.
It is pretty.
I really do not know
the bias.
the reasoning behind it. It's pretty odd.
Well, another cool idea that kind of ties in with everything we've been talking about with the Denjin system and with the buttons, I think it would be cool that, for example, Ryu's got some weird target combos. So he has heavy punch, heavy kick, and this cannot be canceled into anything. I think all they need to do is simply make it so Ryu's able to cancel the last hit into his Denjin stock. So he can have some frame advantage into Denjin stock. And same with his other target combo. This one never gets used. This one, the same thing. They should allow you to cancel the last hit of it into his Denjin stock. Just so you can kind of almost have the best of both worlds of being aggressive while maintaining it. Because, you know, once again, even though we're talking a lot about the Zoni part where he is supposed to be well-rounded. Like, when he has his Denjin stock, he can play any way he wants because all of his core moves are empowered.
Another way you could do it is a little bit like Honda, where you have when you have your stock, certain moves that are not normally cancelable become cancelable. So you could have it that those target combos become cancelable into your Denjin moves.
Yeah.
So like in the corner, you could juggle into a Fireball, for example, or into Hashogeki, and the same thing mid-screen. That could be an interesting buff, and it would give more reason to use those target combos in tandem with the Denjin stock.
Donkey kick should break DI? You guys are crazy. Heavy donkey kick?
That's what I said.
You guys are crazy.
I said I was not gonna mention that because that was too crazy.
What? You guys, you want to just use this move with impunity? We want another Marisa on our hands? Ryu was used in Vanilla Street Fighter 4 and Vanilla Street Fighter 5, but then Capcom gave Ryu some nerfs, and then we just never see the character again. I think Ryu is in a much better position in Street Fighter 6, where he has really good tools this time, because he's the Street Fighter 6 version of Ryu. And I think this character is easy to fix. I think they just really need to focus on this Denjin system. I think this is what's holding him back. It needs to be buffed in some way, or at least give Ryu players more control on how to use it, and not make Ryu put in this weird situation where he doesn't want to throw fireballs sometimes, and it makes him weaker. I think that's what Capcom really needs to focus on. Yeah, maybe his buttons can use some adjustments like we mentioned before, but I think this is the real culprit. As for the drive rush stuff, I mean, that will be alleviated if Capcom actually wants to address drive rush in general as a system mechanic. And his mid-screen conversions for his combos will definitely get buffed in the Crossfire if they do buff his Denjin system. That pretty much summarizes my thoughts on Ryu on the wish list.
I personally like the idea of making his out of Denjin mode, you know, like his normal mode, a little bit more effective at playing neutral and zoning. So his fireballs, I think, should have slightly less recovery. Not that much, you know, like just a couple of frames.
Okay.
But more effective that way. If you don't want to do that, then I think it's fairly important for Ryu to have a way to more effectively go into his Denjin mode off of knockdowns and stuff.
Okay.
Right? So like either make the Denjin charge faster or have ways for him to cancel into the Denjin charge so that, you know, he's more threatening with better frame advantage on knockdowns and stuff. And at least when you have a knockdown situation, for example, in the corner where you're not playing neutral, right? Like you want to press on the offense, then give him better ways of setting up the charge and B+.
I'm really interested on what everyone has to say about Ryu, because even though he's not used much at all in tournament play, he's still a very popular character that you see all the time. So I'm looking forward to the comments on suggestions on how to buff him and where he lacks. I think the majority will say that he definitely needs some buffs. All right, Mir, let's close up shop and we'll talk about some more characters in the future. Bye bye.
Bye bye.